Rocket Rod Bowen in the black car and rising star Gavin Lear were continually at each other for the lead in the New South Wales Championship when, with 4 laps to go, a quick puff of smoke signalled trouble. The fire ruined both drivers' chances, but have a closer look at the slow-motion replay of the actual fire. The flame begins at the front of the car and bursts through the driver's compartment. Bowen's expensive race suit paid for itself in 100th of a second. The restart provided a chance for defending champ Bob Woods to have a go, but he too pushed it just too far. Glenn Revell finally took the checkered flag ahead of Stan Burrows and Terry King. And Lismore drivers made a clean sweep of the State Modified Championship. Steve Robinson retained the title with Stuart Hearn second and Ian Vickery third.
The Port Hacking Club made the trip to Port Stephens for the game fishing competition, and the members went home with a world record. Dennis Castronini felt a tug on his line just after 3:30 yesterday afternoon. After a 2-hour struggle, his mates helped him pull aboard his prize catch. An official weigh-in on shore revealed how big the hammerhead actually was, 258 kilograms, the biggest of its kind ever caught on a 15-kilogram line, and beating the previous record by 21 kilos. The crew of the Selsun celebrated in readiness for the trip home and the stories they would tell about the one that didn't get away. Richard OLeary, NBN News.
Australia has the highest incidence of melanoma in the world. In the mid to late 80s, there was a dramatic increase in the number of melanomas detected.
And we know that the number of moles being cut off in the Hunter region during the 1980s tripled. So what we think has happened is a lot of very early melanomas have been discovered, and that's what accounts for this big increase in incidence.
But the increase in the number found won't necessarily mean an increase in the number of deaths. Professor Robert Burton believes there are 2 types of early melanoma, one that is potentially fatal and another that is not. The Newcastle Melanoma Unit has a valuable data bank. It has access to 2,000 melanomas that were removed from patients. It has also kept information about each patient's outcome.
We know which patients appear to be cured and we know which patients have actually died. So we can actually go back to the melanomas and analyse them to see if there are differences between the melanomas that killed patients and the melanomas that didn't.
Researchers hope to be able to develop a test to determine which early melanomas have the potential to kill.
Allow us to tell a patient that they don't have to worry, they didn't have a fatal form of the disease, or on the other hand to say yes, this is serious and you'll need very careful follow-up for the next few years to detect a recurrence.
Work on the test will begin later this year. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Work started on the 30-hectare site at Awabba near Toronto last July. The $4.5 million development includes a chapel, cremation facilities, administration block and extensive landscaping.
Apart from a true lawn cemetery burial aspect of bronze plates set flush with the grass, there will be no masonry of any kind here. There will be a complete crematorium service to the public with a variety of memorialisation.
When first proposed, the complex raised a number of environmental concerns from nearby residents. After 4 years of planning, developers say they've allayed any fears. The project designed to service a growing need in the community.
We could see with the age list of people over 65, over the next 10 years there would be a dramatic increase in a need for additional memorialisation areas.
Due to be completed early June, the lifespan of Macquarie Memorial Park is predicted well into the next century.
We could foresee possibly 50 years minimum, and possibly could run to 100.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Curry Girl Guides weeded the last few problems at the town cemetery in readiness for the judge's inspection. It's the final touch to 6 years of work that has reaped a succession of Tidy Town awards, including the state title last year and the Hunter's first nomination in the national competition. To win that award, the town would have to impress Judge Rod Pelletier, whose first stop was to look at the handiwork of the Girl Guides.
But when you're dealing with the tidy towns, you're dealing with the best town in each state, so they're sort of beyond tidiness. But you're looking for that, and you're really looking for community involvement. That's one of the big aspects of it.
The greening of the cemetery is just one of the town's projects since 1988. That's included the beautification of the main street and a $12,000 town clock. But that may not be enough to get the tag of tidiest town in Australia, with 6 other centres vying for the honour.
I think we should win.
This is the 4th town I've seen, and Curry's equal number 1 with the other 3 at the moment, and that's all I'm saying.
Curry will have to wait until May for the announcement of the winner. Richard OLeary, NBN News.
The State and National Master Builders Association conferences are being held at the Anchorage Port Stephens. A showpiece for local builders, the Anchorage puts around 200 delegates in easy reach of many of the Hunter's building success stories.
We intend taking interstate guests right throughout the Hunter, and especially Newcastle, its beaches, its earthquake restoration works, and they're keen to see what Newcastle and the Hunter has got to offer, as opposed to capital cities, which we always go to.
Down to business, and the conference is looking at reforms in the building industry. There'll be a revision of the Plain English contract, which covers topics from purchasing land through to contracts and selecting finishings.
Consumers are going to benefit. Certainly they've already seen the release of the Plain English housing contract. That's been a major step forward, and the changes to the licensing, which are proposed and outlined this morning by the General Manager of the Building Services Corporation, mean that builders, in consultation with the BSC, are probably going to see some fundamental changes. Those changes are going to meet the needs of builders and consumers, so that we end up with a better home building industry and perhaps even less regulation.
There's also likely to be a review of the Builders Gold Card accreditation system.
It's our firm view that there needs to be some modification, but certainly we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Thousands of heavy vehicles rumble along the New England highway every day. The fear is some of them may have dangerous defects. Highway patrol officers pull over trucks and buses often to ensure they're safe, but many beat and general duties police fail to check heavy vehicles for defects because they don't know what to look for. But that will change in the Maitland region after today's course in how to spot defects and check logbooks.
When you look at the cost of road trauma to this nation, and the way the police service is progressing, road trauma is a priority of ours, and the monitoring of the safe operational practices of heavy vehicles is also in that priority.
Classroom discussions were given the backing of a practical demonstration on how problems can be identified. The officers are shown how to check the brakes, steering and suspension, the 3 main mechanical faults that lead to crashes.
From RTA sources, 50% of your dangerous defects relate to defective brakes, steering and suspension, so it is quite significant.
Through closer scrutiny of heavy vehicles, police hope to identify problems before rather than after crashes. Richard OLeary, NBN News.
It's by no means a high-profile sport, but being a quiet achiever, 15-year-old Karen Perkins doesn't mind that too much.
People just don't know what it is. No.
Does it bother you when they maybe raise an eyebrow?
Yeah, but I tell my friends at school what it is.
Karen's also setting the selectors straight with impressive performances. The Year 11 student from Lake Macquarie is now the state's best hammer thrower for her age and ranked among the top 3 in Open Division. 2 weeks ago, she bettered her own under-16 state record by a metre, throwing 46.98 metres.
I felt great because my aim is 50 metres and I'm on target to getting that.
At the rate she's going, Karen may well achieve that this year. If she does, it could land her a place on an Australian team to tour Europe.
OK, Karen, come on, now! Good one.
Trains 15 hours a week with her father, Graham. She also travels to Sydney twice a week to work with national women's hammer coach OLeary Barclay. This weekend, Karen is off to the Junior State Championships in Sydney, then the Nationals a week after. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The Saul family was just metres away from safety when tragedy struck. 33-year-old Philip Saul, his 29-year-old wife Leonie and their daughters 4-year-old Melanie and 2-year-old Casey were about to turn into their grandfather's driveway when they were hit by a removal truck. Kempsey is in shock. The accident wiped out one of the town's well-known families.
Hard-working man, saved his money, owned his property, very devoted to his business and to his family. It's a tragedy for all of us.
The fifth victim, 46-year-old James Perry of Falconbridge, was driving a van. His vehicle was hit by the Saul's Magna after it had been hit by the truck.
It would appear the main problem with people on the highway is lack of concentration.
Distressed relatives were today given special counselling. Police investigating the crash won't say if any charges will be laid. They're still to interview witnesses who saw the removal truck hit the Saul's car. It all happened just a kilometre from the scene of the 1989 bus crash that claimed 35 lives in Australia's worst road disaster.
At the bottom line, if we had a divided highway, you wouldn't have had yesterday's accident.
But Bruce Baird admits upgrading this notorious section of the highway into double lanes could be 10 years away. Flo Bitcon, National 9 News, Clybucca Flat.
Killed in the crash were 33-year-old Philip Saul of Kempsey, his wife Leonie, 29, and their daughters Melanie, 4, and Casey Lee, 2. The family was in a Mitsubishi station wagon waiting to turn right into a relative's driveway when their vehicle was clipped from behind by a truck. The station wagon was pushed into the path of an oncoming van, whose driver, James Perry of Falconbridge, also died. A passenger in the front escaped with minor injuries. The two vehicles burst into flames on impact. The crash occurred a short distance from Australia's worst bus smash in 1989. But that section of road, like the one where yesterday's crash happened, is a relatively good stretch of the Pacific Highway.
There's nothing wrong with the road surface. It's quite wide. There's an open view where the accident happened yesterday. So I couldn't say that the road's a contributing factor.
Kempsey Traffic Sergeant Dennis Knoll says the crash can be a lesson to other motorists.
My suggestion there is if people are going to make a right-hand turn on the highway, they should pull off the road to the left-hand side, wait till there's no vehicles travelling in either direction, and then make their right-hand turn.
Minister Bruce Baird has acknowledged that it seems likely that if the road was dual carriageway, the smash may not have happened. The state government does have construction of dual carriageways between Hexham and the Queensland border in its Motorway Pacific Tollway plans. But with construction of the first stages at Bulladila and Chindra on the far north coast not expected to begin for a year, it appears unlikely the stretch of road north of Kempsey will be dual carriageway for some time to come. Selena Buresti, NBN News.
New and old faces trained together today at Broadmeadow Stadium, all except Captain Terry Dozier.
Terry is coming slowly back from the operation, and so we've decided to give him another week before he'll actually come to team training.
The Falcons will travel by plane to Temora in southwestern New South Wales. It will mark the opening of the town's new basketball stadium. It will also give coach Tom Wiseman an indication of how well his team will perform in the NBL this year.
We're happy with the team that we've put together. The attitude is great, and we feel that we have a really nicely balanced team with that has some talent, and we're optimistic about our chances this year. We're looking forward to it.
The season proper will begin on April the 9th when the Falcons play Adelaide at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre.
The survey covers all New South Wales employees at coal mines and washeries, including administrative, technical and clerical staff. The average weekly earnings for each employee in the industry was about $1,200 during the June quarter last year. That's an increase of 4.3% over the previous year. Earnings refers to gross wages and salaries paid before tax and other deductions. Workers at underground mines received an increase of 3.2%, taking their weekly earnings to about $1,150. The biggest increase was at open-cut mines. Earnings jumped by 6.8% to about $1,350 each week. There's considerable variation in employees' earnings from mine to mine. These differences mainly relate to production bonuses and overtime.
Emergency services rushed to Parkway Avenue in inner-city Newcastle where two cars had collided. One had crashed off a bridge and into a stormwater drain. The car's 20-year-old driver was trapped in the wreck. A man in his 60s from the other car staggered to safety. Firefighters set a boom across the drain to catch leaking fuel and oil. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
Since being named in the stateside, Danielle Harvey and Reagan Gilmore have wasted no time in developing their teamwork. With dark-haired Danielle playing goalkeeper and Reagan either goal or wing defence, a good understanding will be vital. While Reagan has already been in national squads and represented New South Wales last year, the Blues selection is a first for 17-year-old Harvey.
It was the best feeling when my name got announced on Sunday. I was just so happy. I've been working at it for 3 years.
The next few months will be hectic for both girls. Not only will they travel to Sydney twice a week to train with the stateside, they're also set to begin local team commitments. Reagan in the National Super League competition and Danielle playing for Newcastle in the State League Championship. The pair will travel to Tasmania in June for the national titles.
Coming third last year, hopefully we'll be able to win it this year, take the cup home to New South Wales.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News. Several Breakers players have recently made personal contributions to the supporters bench, and last night most of them took a front row seat before the game between Newcastle and Malaysian side Johor. Among the new recruits, 3-month-old Emily, daughter number 3 for Ralph and Michelle Mayer. Lisa and Rod Brown entered the parental stakes in December with the birth of their son Corey, and Jenny and Darren Stewart had their first child Matthew just over 2 months ago. For Stewart, last night's game was his last with the Breakers this season. A card in Friday night's game left him suspended for this Sunday's match, and next Tuesday he and Warren Spink jet out to join up with their Malaysian clubs Perak and Johor respectively. This will be Stewart's second year in Malaysia. He believes it's time well spent.
It's a good experience, the money's very good and we come back here fully fit.
Overseas playing commitments for Stewart and Spink begin later this month, with the competition lasting till August. Stewart says he and Spink are definite starters with the Breakers for the 94-95 season, although Stewart would like his future with the club extended.
I'd like to get a long-term plan. I'm seeing Pat Clark tomorrow and hopefully we'll come up with a longer deal.
Eight months ago, Maitland Council welcomed an informal submission from Aluminium Australia that promised a new industry, 40 jobs and a $10 million turnover a year, with a further expansion to create 300 more jobs and increasing turnover to hundreds of millions of dollars. The aluminium recycling plant at Rutherford would use waste from the Curry and Tomago smelter plants to produce dross, an aluminium byproduct. But the relationship with the council soured last night after council delayed its decision on the centre. Council will pay for an independent assessment of the environmental impact statement that recommended the development. Council's own planning department accepted this statement, as did 2 state authorities.
The EPA and the Department of Planning have both looked at our EIS and they're quite happy.
But the assessment given to council by a former Curry Smelter engineering manager and a world authority on dross production, Peter Whiteley, has called the EIS misleading. Mr Whiteley says the EIS missed the greatest hazard in processing liquid aluminium, the potential for a major explosion. He says the developers claim the technology is the most efficient and proven is simply not true. Councillor Martin says pollution is also a major risk.
That's 800 tonnes of waste going into our tip face every week, and that's just unacceptable.
But the developers say they'll go to the Land and Environment Court or the Minister for Planning if Maitland Council doesn't give the go-ahead. Richard OLeary, NBN News. The furor started when member for Wallsend, John Mills, revealed more than a month ago cleaning time had been cut by about 25% in the region's schools after the service was privatised in late January. He repeated those claims and more in Parliament earlier this week. Mr Mills said cleaners were allowed only 2 minutes per room a day. He claims students were forced to clean floors and sweep the schoolyard. Mr Mills backed this with a letter from a school P&C association complaining about its students being forced to empty garbage bins and lock up classrooms. The school says the letter is a month old and is now satisfied with the cleaning service. The cleaning company, Tempo, is responsible for cleaning more than 270 Hunter schools and says it's well on the way to fixing any problems.
We do have a concern, brought to us by the client. We certainly address that as soon as possible.
Mr Norris agrees cleaning times have been cut and staff reduced from 700 to 500, but he says new equipment and training make the service more efficient.
A reduction in hours doesn't mean a reduction in the quality of cleaning. Tempo have given a commitment that the quality of cleaning will not deteriorate, and we're certainly out and about in the field making sure that the cleaning is certainly being performed.
Richard OLeary, NBN News.
At the centre of the controversy is Confetti Nightclub and Chicago Bar and Grill restaurant on Newcastle's foreshore. Opened last December by American-born brothers Kevin and Kenton Jenkins, the Newcastle concept was to be the first in a chain of restaurants nationally. However, the nightclub gleam appears to have dulled. Sydney Chartered Accountants Stardine Wilcox have been appointed administrators and have scheduled a meeting of the club's 100 or so creditors on Monday. Meantime, as the administrators assess the company's financial stability, it's business as usual. While that may keep patrons happy, it's angered local subcontractors who say they're collectively owed around $350,000 for work done on the building. Lake Macquarie painters Tim and Gwen Ross did $13,000 worth of work. They claim to be $4,000 short.
I came in and seen one of the American owners and I was crying, upset because I thought my child was going to miss out on Christmas.
Carpenter Peter Francis has been paid, but he's still outraged.
These fellas have got wives and kids at home. They need their money. And no one likes to work for 4 weeks and not get paid.
When asked to comment today, Confetti staff refused. However, during our visit, the Sydney administrator called to organise a media conference for tomorrow. According to the Master Builders Association, there are few insurance provisions to ensure the subcontractors get paid.
This is such a hot issue in the building industry at the moment that the federal government, through one of its agencies, has established a working party who are right at this moment compiling a report on the financial viability of head contractors and subcontractors. It's called a surety bonding.
Following Monday's meeting, another one will be called involving the creditors within the following 3 weeks. There it will be decided if the company should go into liquidation, if the business should be wound up or continue to trade. Catherine Lamond, NBN News. The levy known as a benefit rate is paid by property owners on top of normal council rates. Based on unimproved land value and managed by the City Centre Committee, it's used to improve the inner business district both structurally and aesthetically. This year, the committee is looking to increase the annual rate by around $540,000 to $882,000. That sum being spent on things like trees, capital improvements and marketing. It's also proposed to introduce a free bus shuttle operating around the inner city. The $200,000 for parking metres is the estimated cost of keeping town metre-free. If business operators totally oppose the plan, a second option is to drop the parking metre and bus fees. While happy with inner city promotions to date, the increased levy hasn't proved popular with business operators.
Not if it's going to go towards more administration and not being used in the actual CBD.
I think there needs to be something done in the area, but I think basically the increases are far too high and we need to look at it in more detail.
Peter Evans maintains with a drop in land value, businesses are paying less in council rates, this drop offsetting the increase in the benefit levy.
The increase that we're asking for this year is about 60% of the saving they make over their 1992 rates. In fact, what's happened is that in 1994, their rates are $800,000 less than they were in 1992.
The City Centre Committee will discuss the increased levy with business operators on Monday night. However, final approval of the increase rests with state government.
Last week, Scott McGrath proved he's one of the country's best as part of the Victoria's New South Wales Under-19 4,000 metres pursuit team. The team established a new world record in trials before breaking their own time in the final to grab their second successive national win. It was a more relaxed ride at his home in Tinambit today, but it won't be for long with Scott selected in the Australian squad for the Junior World Championships at Ecuador in August. It sounds like a dream run to cycling glory, but it's an exhausting and expensive journey. He trains 3 times a week and races most other days, with Scott and his parents paying for most of the transport and equipment costs. His training bike is worth more than $3,000, his racing bike even more expensive, even though it has or brakes.
Well, the back wheels were for around $1,500 to $1,600. The front ones were for around $850. The frame cost me around $1,000, and the rest of the parts, the cranks and seat and that's worth around $600.
Richard OLeary, NBN News. Bryan Street neighbours alerted fire crews at about 10:30 this morning after smoke was noticed streaming from the weatherboard house.
Fire coming out of the windows, just fully. That's about it. People just running everywhere screaming, grab the hose, grab the hose.
Firefighters quickly controlled the outbreak, leaving a smoky and wet mess. Both floors of the house were extensively damaged, but neighbouring buildings escaped unscathed.
Downstairs was severely damaged and the upper floors have all been heavily smoke logged. But the good part about it is we did save the place next door and we saved all the exposures.
But that was little comfort for the crews once they realised the burnt-out house belonged to a workmate. As the cleaning up operations continued, one firefighter tried to ring his colleague with the bad news. The loss was even more frustrating as the house had been smouldering for several hours and could have been contained if spotted earlier.
The fire had been bottled up and it was only that when the pressure broke the windows that we did see the smoke, so it has been bottled up for a long time.
It's believed an electrical fault or a cigarette may have set a chair alight. Richard OLeary, NBN News.